Natasha Monroe stood in her penthouse studio, surrounded by flowing fabrics and half-finished sketches. The afternoon sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden patterns across her workspace. Outside, the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly, waves crashing against the rocky shore below. Her fashion label had just been featured in Vogue for the third time this year. Models worldwide begged to wear her designs. Yet as she looked at her reflection in the studio mirror, she saw a woman who had forgotten how to feel, 30-2 years old, and she had already buried her heart 3 times. The first was Derek, her college sweetheart who chose his career over their future. Then came Michael, the charming businessman who turned out to be married. And finally Thomas, the man she almost married who left her 2 weeks before their wedding for her former best friend. Each betrayal had added another brick to the wall around her heart. Now that wall felt impenetrable. Her assistant Jenny peeked through the doorway with cautious excitement. "Natasha, there's an art exhibition tonight at the Coastal Gallery. Several photographers are showcasing ocean conservation work. I thought you might want to go for inspiration for the new summer collection." Natasha barely looked up from her sketchpad. "I don't have time for galleries, Jenny. Send them a donation, and my regards." "But one of the photographers specifically requested your presence. He said your use of ocean blues in last season's collection moved him deeply." Jenny handed her an elegant, cream-colored invitation with embossed lettering. Something about the sincerity in those words made Natasha pause. She wasn't used to being approached for her art rather than her status. "Fine," she said, surprising herself. "I'll make an appearance." The unexpected encounter at the Coastal Gallery hummed with quiet sophistication that evening. Unlike the loud, champagne-soaked events Natasha usually attended, this space felt contemplative. The walls displayed breathtaking photographs of marine life, each image telling a story of beauty and fragility. Natasha moved through the exhibition with practiced grace, her navy silk dress flowing with each step. Then she stopped before a photograph that stole her breath. A humpback whale breached from dark waters, frozen mid-leap against a stormy sky. But it wasn't just the technical excellence that captivated her. The image somehow captured loneliness and freedom in the same frame. It felt like looking into a mirror. She was swimming alone, a voice said beside her, warm and unhurried. Separated from her pod during a storm. I followed her for 3 days, watching her search. Natasha turned to find a man in his mid-30s, wearing a simple gray sweater and jeans that contrasted sharply with the formal attire of other guests. His sun-weathered face and gentle brown eyes suggested someone who spent more time with nature than people. There was an easiness about him that immediately made her defensive. "Did she find them?" Natasha asked, keeping her tone neutral. "Eventually, yes. On the 4th morning, I heard her song change. It became hopeful. 2 hours later, her family answered." He extended his hand. "I'm Julian Hayes. Thank you for coming tonight." His handshake was warm and genuine, nothing like the calculated grips of the businessmen she usually met. "Natasha Monroe, your work is remarkable. So is yours," Julian replied. "I've admired how you translate ocean movements into fabric designs. The way your dresses flow, it's like watching water take human form." Natasha felt something unfamiliar flutter in her chest. Most men complimented her beauty or success, but rarely her actual artistry. She quickly suppressed the feeling. "That's very observant of you." When walls started to crack, they walked through the gallery together, Julian explaining the story behind each photograph with genuine passion. He spoke about months spent on boats, sleeping under stars, waiting for the perfect moment when light and life aligned. There was no bravado in his stories, no attempt to impress. He simply shared his love for the ocean and its creatures. "Don't you get lonely?" Natasha asked, surprising herself with a personal question. "Spending so much time alone out there." Julian considered this thoughtfully. "Sometimes. But I've learned that being alone isn't the same as being lonely. Some of my loneliest moments happened in crowded rooms, surrounded by people who didn't really see me." His words struck something deep within her. She knew that loneliness intimately, the kind that existed even at her most glamorous parties, even in the arms of men who claimed to love her. "And what about you?" Julian asked gently. "Your design suggests someone who understands deep emotion, yet you seem to hold it all at arm's length." Natasha's defenses snapped up immediately. You don't know me well enough to make that judgment. You're right. I apologize. Julian's tone held no offense, just acceptance. I have a habit of reading too much into things. Occupational hazard of watching whales for months trying to understand their language. Something about his immediate, genuine apology softened her. Most men would have gotten defensive or tried to argue their point. Julian simply acknowledged her boundary and stepped back. As the evening wound down, Julian walked her to the gallery entrance. I'm leading a small whale-watching expedition next Saturday. Just a handful of people on a research boat. Would you be interested? No pressure, just an offer to see the inspiration behind your ocean blues in their natural home. Every instinct told Natasha to say no. She didn't do spontaneous boat trips with men she'd just met. She didn't let strangers into her carefully controlled world. But something about the way he asked, without expectation, without agenda, made her pause. I'll think about it, she heard herself say. Julian smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. That's all I could ask for. Good night, Natasha. As she drove home along the coastal highway, the moon reflecting silver across dark waters, Natasha realized she was still thinking about him. Not his appearance or his success, but the way he'd made her feel seen without trying to possess her. The way he'd respected her walls, while gently acknowledging they existed. For the first time in years, a tiny crack appeared in the fortress around her heart. And despite everything, despite all her past pain and practiced cynicism, she felt the smallest flicker of something dangerous: hope. Saturday morning arrived with clear skies and unusually calm seas. Natasha had spent the entire week convincing herself not to go, listing all the rational reasons to stay home. Yet here she was, standing at the dock in borrowed sailing boots, watching Julian prepare a modest research vessel with practiced efficiency. You came, he said, his smile warm but not surprised, as if he'd somehow known she would. I almost didn't, Natasha admitted, adjusting her windbreaker. This isn't really my kind of thing. What is your kind of thing? Julian asked as he helped her aboard. Controlled environments, predictable outcomes, solid ground beneath my feet. Julian laughed softly. Well, the ocean offers none of those things. But maybe that's exactly what makes it worth experiencing. The small group included a marine biologist named Patricia, a young photographer named Devin, and an elderly couple, Frank and Ruth, who had been whale-watching enthusiasts for 40 years. Their easy camaraderie made Natasha feel like an outsider initially, but no one pushed her to be anything other than herself. As the boat moved away from shore, Natasha gripped the railing, watching the coastline shrink. The fashion shows, the business meetings, the carefully constructed world she lived in, all of it seemed to fade into something distant and small. Out here, surrounded by endless blue, her usual armor felt unnecessary. The moment everything shifted, they had been sailing for 2 hours when Patricia spotted the first spout of water in the distance. Julian immediately cut the engine, letting the boat drift in respectful silence. And then they appeared, a pod of gray whales, massive and graceful. Moving through the water like living islands, Natasha stood transfixed. She'd seen whales in documentaries, but nothing prepared her for the reality of their presence. When one surfaced barely 20 feet from the boat, so close she could see barnacles clustered on its skin and the gentle intelligence in its eye. Something inside her broke open. Tears streamed down her face before she even realized she was crying. Years of suppressed emotion, of keeping herself locked away, suddenly found release. Julian appeared beside her, not touching, just present. It's overwhelming, isn't it? He said quietly. When you realize how much beauty exists that has nothing to do with us, how much life continues whether we're watching or not. I'd forgotten, Natasha whispered, her voice breaking. I'd forgotten that anything could make me feel this much. Julian handed her a handkerchief without fanfare. The heart remembers how to open, even after we've tried to seal it shut. It just needs the right invitation. They sat together on the deck as the pod slowly moved on, the afternoon sun warming their faces. Natasha found herself talking, really talking, for the first time in years. She told him about Derek, Michael, and Thomas. about how each heartbreak had taught her that protecting herself mattered more than staying open. About the loneliness of building a life everyone admired, but no one truly shared. Julian listened without interruption, without judgment, without trying to fix anything. When she finally fell silent, he was quiet for a long moment before speaking. His story of loss: "I was married once," Julian said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Her name was Rebecca. She was a marine biologist, brilliant and brave and full of light. We met on a research vessel, fell in love between storms and sunrises. She was my entire world. Natasha's breath caught. She hadn't expected this. We had 3 beautiful years together. Then she got sick. Cancer, aggressive and fast. She died 6 months after diagnosis. Julian's voice remained steady, but Natasha could hear the old pain beneath it. I spent 2 years after that just ... existing. Not living, just going through motions. I couldn't imagine ever feeling whole again. What changed? Natasha asked softly. A humpback whale, actually. I was on a boat, photographing for work, but feeling nothing. Then this whale surfaced beside us, and she sang. Just stayed there, singing for nearly an hour. And something in her song reminded me that grief and love aren't opposites. They're companions. You can't have one without having truly experienced the other. He turned to face Natasha then, his eyes holding depths of understanding that only came from real suffering. I learned that closing yourself off doesn't protect you from pain. It just prevents you from ever feeling joy again. And Rebecca wouldn't have wanted that for me. She lived too fully to want me to stop living after she was gone. The storm that brought them closer, the return journey started peacefully enough. But weather on the ocean changes quickly. Dark clouds rolled in faster than anyone anticipated, and within 20 minutes, they were navigating through choppy waters and increasing winds. Julian handled the boat with calm expertise, but Natasha's panic rose with each wave that crashed against the hull. I need you to help me, Julian called over the wind, gesturing for Natasha to take the wheel. I have to secure some equipment before it goes overboard. I can't. I don't know how to drive a boat. Natasha's fear was sharp and real. Yes, you can. Just hold it steady. Keep the bow pointed into the waves. I trust you. And then he was gone, moving across the pitching deck with sure-footed confidence. Natasha gripped the wheel with white knuckles, her heart pounding. Every wave felt like it might capsize them. But she held on, following Julian's instructions, feeling the boat respond to her guidance. And somewhere in those terrifying minutes, something shifted. She realized she was doing it. She was facing something scary and unknown. She wasn't shattering. When Julian returned, rain-soaked and grinning, he didn't take the wheel immediately. Instead, he stood behind her, hands over hers on the wheel. See, you're stronger than you think. You just needed a reason to remember. They navigated the storm together, his presence steady and reassuring. By the time they reached the dock, the rain had stopped, leaving everything washed clean and new. As the others disembarked, thanking Julian for the adventure, Natasha lingered behind. Today was ... She started struggling to find words real. Julian offered gently. Terrifying, beautiful, real, she agreed. I haven't felt this much in so long. I'd forgotten what it was like. Feeling isn't a weakness, Natasha. It's what makes us human. Julian smiled, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face with casual tenderness. And for what it's worth, I think you're remarkable. Not despite your walls, but because of what it must have taken to build them. That kind of self-protection comes from having truly loved and lost. As Natasha drove home that evening, her clothes still damp and salty, her face windburned and makeup-free, she felt more alive than she had in years. Julian hadn't tried to scale her walls or break them down. He'd simply shown her that there might be something worth coming out for. And maybe, just maybe, some men were different. Maybe not every heart offered to her would break. Maybe real love existed after all. The weeks following the whale-watching trip unfolded like a story Natasha had never dared to write for herself. Julian didn't overwhelm her with attention or grand gestures. Instead, he offered something far more powerful. Consistency and patience. He texted her photographs from his morning beach walks with simple captions. The sunrise reminded me of the coral shade in your spring collection. He invited her to casual coffee meetings with no expectations beyond conversation. When she canceled twice because work anxiety overwhelmed her, he simply said, "Whenever you're ready. I'm not going anywhere." His gentleness terrified her more than any passionate pursuit ever had. She'd learned to navigate men who wanted to possess her, to add her to their collection of achievements. But Julian wanted nothing from her except her authentic self, and she wasn't sure she remembered how to be that person. One evening, as they walked along the moonlit beach near her penthouse, Natasha finally voiced her fear. "I don't know how to do this, Julian. I don't know how to let someone in without preparing for them to leave." Julian stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "Then don't prepare for me to leave. Don't prepare for anything. Just be here now, in this moment, with me. That's all real love asks for. Presence, not guarantees." "That sounds impossibly simple," Natasha whispered. "The best things usually are." Julian took her hand, his touch warm and certain. "I'm not asking you to trust that I'll never hurt you. People hurt each other sometimes, even when they love deeply. I'm asking you to trust that I'll stay and work through it when things get hard, that I'll choose you even on the days when it isn't easy." The crisis that tested everything Natasha's world tilted violently one Tuesday morning when her business partner called with devastating news. Someone had stolen her designs. A major fast fashion company had knocked off her entire upcoming collection and would release it weeks before her own launch. Years of work, months of creative energy, all about to be undercut and devalued. She spiraled immediately. All the old patterns activated: isolation, control, shutting down. She ignored Julian's calls, buried herself in emergency meetings with lawyers, barely ate or slept. This was her fortress mode, the place where she felt safe because she felt nothing. On the third day, Julian simply showed up at her studio at midnight, carrying Thai, food, and patience. "You don't have to talk," he said, setting up the meal in her workspace. "You don't have to explain or apologize or be anything other than exhausted and scared. I'm just going to be here." Natasha wanted to tell him to leave, to handle this alone like she handled everything. Instead, she found herself breaking down completely. "They stole it, Julian. They took the thing I poured my heart into and made it cheap and meaningless. How do I come back from this?" "The same way the whale I told you about found her pod," Julian said, pulling her into his arms. "You keep swimming. You keep singing your song. And you remember that your value isn't in what others can take from you. Your real gift, the thing they can never copy, is how you see the world. Your vision. Your heart. That's what makes your work special, and no one can steal that." When actions proved everything over the next 2 weeks, Julian proved his love in ways that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with partnership. He researched intellectual property lawyers, sat through tedious legal meetings without complaint, and brought her food when she forgot to eat. But more than that, he reminded her who she was. "Look at this," he said one evening, pulling up images of her very first collection. The one she'd created in her tiny apartment 6 years ago. "You made this with almost nothing. You built an empire from talent and determination. This setback, it's just another wave. You've navigated storms before." His faith in her reignited something Natasha had almost lost: her faith in herself. She stopped seeing the theft as an ending and started seeing it as an opportunity to prove her work was inimitable. She redesigned portions of the collection, making it even bolder and more distinctly hers. She launched early with a powerful statement about originality and artistic integrity that went viral. The fashion world rallied around her. The knockoff company faced backlash, and Natasha's collection sold out within hours, cementing her reputation as an artist, not just a designer. Through it all, Julian celebrated her victories and held space for her fears. He never tried to be her savior, just her partner, and that made all the difference. The moment she finally believed, 3 months after they met, Julian took Natasha back to the spot where they'd seen the whale pod. This time, they were alone on his boat, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and rose. "I need to tell you something," Natasha said, her voice steady but vulnerable. Every man before you taught me that love was a transaction, that it required me to be perfect, to never need anything, to always give more than I received. You've shown me that real love is just ... presence, seeing someone fully and choosing to stay. I'll always choose to stay, Julian said simply, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Natasha felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of relief, of release, of finally understanding what she'd been searching for all along. I love you, she said, the words both terrifying and liberating. Not because you saved me or completed me, but because you saw me and stayed. Because you proved that some men mean what they say. Because you made me believe in love again when I thought I never would. Julian cupped her face in his hands, his smile holding all the warmth of the setting sun. I love you too. Exactly as you are, walls and wounds and all the beautiful strength it took to survive your past. You don't need to be anything other than yourself with me. That's always been enough. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home to a place she'd never known existed. A place where love was safe and steady, where vulnerability was strength, and where broken hearts could heal into something even more beautiful than before. As darkness fell and stars emerged above the endless ocean, Natasha realized that every heartbreak she'd endured had been leading her here, to this moment, to this man, to the understanding that real love wasn't about finding someone who would never hurt her. It was about finding someone who would stay and grow and choose her every single day. Julian had proven what every painful relationship before had made her doubt, that real love existed. Not the fairy tale version, but the authentic kind, messy and imperfect and worth every risk. The kind that didn't demand perfection, but celebrated presence. The kind that didn't break at the first storm, but held steady through the waves. And for the first time in her adult life, Natasha Monroe allowed herself to believe in forever, not because she was naive, but because she'd finally found a love strong enough to make belief feel like truth